As spiritual beings, because we are spiritual beings, we seek to live beyond our truth and beyond our failures into God's truth and power. Our darkness, our sins, our distrust, our frustrations, and our motivations often come, however, from our fears more than our loves. And so to be able to move into a more sacred sense of our connections to the divine and to live into being the beloved children of God, we must actually take time during this section of recognizing our gifts to recognize the gift of fear. Fear is a strange gift, isn't it? Yet, our deepest fears usually start and stand alongside our greatest desires and loves. And God does know that we will never succeed into perfect love because our spiritual selves are still human, and we still will always live with human temptations and fears. And thus we need the love and the guidance of the Good Shepherd of Jesus Christ, who is able to be truly human and divine, to know the best ways to face our fears. We need Jesus to stand beside us because it is scary to know how to engage in the darkness. That is probably why there are lots of scriptures, not just the 4 today, but lots of scriptures that say the phrase, "Do not be afraid." So instead of fighting our fears or pretending that they do not exist, our faith actually again and again calls us to face them, face the temptations, so that we can then live faithfully by depending on God to engage with us, to conquer the evils that surround us, and to live a real life with love that can overcome fears. And ultimately, then we can live out our faith, and it can bring us a sense of deep, God-like courage in the face of unhealthy, hurtful, and sinful fears. We can overcome the evil that continuously tempts us, as Jesus was tempted in the wilderness. Put God first. However, we all don't actually have the same type of fears. Just as we all have spiritual gifts that can be developed and lived out, we all have individual types of fears that motivate us in the choices we may or may not make. For example, some of us do not like snakes. Some of us would lose our minds if we saw a snake right now. And others would just laugh at us who are losing our minds because there's a snake. Just like the 5 love languages that we talked about a few weeks ago, they remind us that we do not experience love in the same way. And so many of us do not experience fear in the same way because we have all had different lives. And let's be honest, some fear is healthy. But there is that fine line where fears can quickly cross into a place that becomes self-focused and not creation and community-focused. When our fears reinforce unhealthy systems, make us irrational, or inhibit us from being God's people as a community and as spiritual individuals, then we must find our ways to be courageous like Moses in Deuteronomy and walk forward into the darkness with God as the real light to guide us. We must move with a focus that is not self-inward, but is outward of ourselves and into all of God's creation. And that sounds great, right? I mean, that's what we're supposed to do. Let's love, let's face our fears. But there's got to be some practical ways to really figure figure out our greatest fears and how they may be different than other people's and motivate us in different ways. And we've started to gather a lot of tools and resources, our buckets, our love languages, Strength Finder 2.0, and all the other resources we've kind of hit upon during all of these sermon series. And today I'm going to share with you my favorite. It's a modern tool. It's just a tool. So like a lot of the things that I presented from this pulpit as we go through our lives and try to figure out how to be our spiritual beings, you can take it or you can leave it depending on who you are. But for me, this has been the most helpful. It's been really helpful in my life, my faith journey, to overcome and understand my motivations in comparison with what God's motivations may be. It has helped me numerous times to find peace in a world filled with conflict. And it really is just a tool, just like some of you who know your Myers-Briggs or one of the other personality tests. This is the one I've spent the most time with. It is called the Enneagram. Have any of you worked with the Enneagram? We have one. So you're the only one who's not going to be totally lost, but try to stick with me. The good thing about the Enneagram is that I'm not an expert, but for our purposes today, to begin an awareness of our motivations, we do not need to be experts. We're going to walk through an article by Heidi, probably Pride. She posted it on the Thoughts and Expressions company blog in November 2015. Now, it's a little different way of engaging into the Enneagram because it lists the fears that motivate what the Enneagram has said is the 9 primary personality types. So as we go through these, I handed some of you a little sheet of paper of the 9 different types of fears. Start to think about what might be your top 3. Here's a list of all of them. And take a moment, there's a little bit of homework involved in this one, just so that you can start to get an idea of the possibilities. And as Delbert reminded me, we all at some point have had all of these fears in some way or another. This is just to describe which ones are the dominant fears for you. I mean, take time if you're starting to struggle to think back when you were maybe 10 or 11. For those of you who have passed 10 and 11, and think about how you responded as a child to these types of fears and feelings. Sometimes that's actually really helpful when trying to figure out our motivations. What did we learn as kids? That is what we continue to do as adults. And so as we kind of go through them today, I decided, I had this long conversation on a Facebook group of other people, and I decided to talk through them to figure out which Bible characters went along with each personality type. So you're welcome to take notes and go home and study the Bible character that goes along with you. Because the first one we're going to talk about is the fear of loss and separation from others. If this is your dominant fear, then your underlying fear is that you will become disconnected from others and out of sync with the world around you. These people feel secure and okay as long as they are living in harmony with the people and the world around them. They are constantly moving away from conflict. These people do not like conflict. And they're moving away from pain towards peace and stability and harmony. The biblical character choice for this was Joseph. See, hi, I'm Joseph. I have these awesome dreams, but I'm not sure why. People get really angry when I actually share them with people like my brothers. Yet, I will find a way to forgive. There will come a point where I am able to still keep the peace and harmony and forgive no matter what, because I want peace and harmony in this world. So for those of you who may feel connected to Joseph, there's a fun one. The fear of being harmed or controlled by others. The underlying fear is being violated or betrayed or controlled while at the mercy of others. They feel secure and okay as long as they are in control of their circumstances. These are people who are often very strong, bossy, independent, self-directed, very, very loud personalities. So I put Deborah, the judge, who often gets photoed sitting next to this tree, but do you really think I'm sitting next to this tree all day? We need to take back control. So she goes to find Barack, and it's like, Barack, come on, let's move it. We cannot lose. We've got to get our lives back under control and be in charge of what is happening. The next one is the fear of deprivation and pain. The pervasive underlying fear is that these needs and desires will not be met by others. And so they must pursue them themselves. They are constantly aiming to moving away from pain, sadness, and helplessness towards independence, happiness, and fulfillment. These people are usually a lot of fun. They are the ones who are great at denial. And so I have Miriam, Moses' sister, who's going to kind of ignore all the rules of society and going to just keep singing and dancing until it all gets fixed and until we can figure it out. And as she says, a little denial never hurt anything. It just keeps us moving forward and getting to where we need to be. The fear of being without support or guidance. The pervasive underlying fear for this one is that someone is incapable of surviving on their own, and they must therefore seek out as much support and direction from others as possible. I will let you know that this is probably the most common fear. These are the people, though, that always plan for the worst case scenario. Those people like Noah. I'm ready for the worst case scenario. Everyone is going to die, and yet I will live because I followed those exact instructions that God gave me. I hope, I got the ark, I'm ready to go. So Noah was my example for these. The fear of being helpless and inadequate. The underlying fear of being helpless, overwhelmed, and incapable of dealing with the world around them. Therefore, they must learn as much as they can and master as much as they can in order to reassure themselves that they are competent and capable. They are constantly aiming to move away from ignorance and ambiguity and toward knowledge and understanding. These are usually your brainiacs, your smart people, the people who read everything, who can answer everything around them. People like King Saul, because they always still kind of are so smart that they're a little weird. And so King Saul is a little weird in the Old Testament. I mean, he feels misunderstood. He was selected by God to be the very first king, and for some reason, nobody's letting him lead. Do they not know how smart I am? He's done all the research and read all the books. Then we have the fear of lacking unique and significant identity. The fear that they will be worthless and unlovable if they were average. Therefore, they must cultivate as unique an identity as possible in order to prove their own significance. These are often intense individuals, sometimes really creative people who are a part of the world. And so I thought of John the Baptist. It was like, Jesus is awesome, but I still have my own unique style. Don't you see how creative and deep I am living out here in the woods? I also hope to leave my mark as well. The fear of being unaccomplished and worthless. This type's pervasive underlying fear is they are inherently worthless and undesirable apart from their achievements. They must therefore accomplish as much as possible in order to be desired and accepted by others. And this is David. David, hopefully I can conquer a large guy, get the Ark of the Covenant, and write a few Psalms today, or no one might notice me. Overachiever and biblical extraordinaire would be David. Those people who always want you to say, that's really good, I'm really proud of you. The fear of being unloved or unwanted by others. The fear that there's nothing inherently lovable about them. And therefore they must always help others in order to earn their love. Their prime motivation in life is proving themselves worthy of care and love from others. These are people like Ruth. Ruth, who gave everyone, Naomi and Boaz, all of her time and her energy. And so she works hard so that she does things so that they will continue to love her. And finally, the last one. The fear of being evil or corrupt. The underlying fear is that they themselves are corrupt, and they must act in a virtuous way in order to prove this fear wrong. Their prime motivation in life is their own sense of integrity. Often this person tries to feel perfect and do everything right, like Peter. This world is to be perfect with Jesus, and I am following Jesus super close so that I do not mess up. Please do not let me mess up. And yeah, we know Peter continuously messes up, but he keeps coming back to be like, no, I got this. I've got a sense of integrity for the greater good. Needs me to be good. You see, our fears, just like our loves, come from the skills that we as children learned and needed to survive in the world as we knew. I mean, we're constantly as humans trying to be recognized and noticed. And some of us knew childhoods where scarcity was the norm. Thus, we as adults work hard to make sure that we are not caught without food or protection. Or some of us may have had siblings that were recognized for all of their achievements, and thus we responded by seeking recognition through being more well-behaved, or vice versa. Maybe some of us were surrounded by sadness when we were children, and thus we found joy in creating moments that let us move away from those sad thoughts and make somebody laugh for just a moment. Because sadness is hard. Comparing ourselves with others is hard. Being caught off guard is hard. Conflict is hard. Feeling stupid sometimes, which isn't a nice word, is also hard. Feeling like what you won't be significant or recognized is hard. Feeling like people are out to get you is hard. Feeling like no one might care about you is hard. And thus we must recognize that letting go of these fears that have come from a survival skill set, to call ourselves to move away from that skill set into an uncomfortable and vulnerable place of being able to be open and feeling worthy and loved, just as we are as a spiritual being with God. And while that sounds amazing, it is hard. Because there are people, understandably so, who need to hold on to those fears and hurtful systems. Because going through the process of leaving them and abandoning them and becoming vulnerable is hard. And there are people, because of the things that they've experienced, cannot hear the prophetic words in the Bible and God's Spirit today, because our fears block the way to really know that we are loved and lovable. Our fear for all of us, at some point, no matter who we are, because we are human, will always somewhat block the way from us being able to engage as Jesus does in perfect love. Yet we can name our fears. We can name our loves. We can seek healthier and more faithful ways to live as God's people without fear and thus without hate. We can seek to find understanding for both ourselves and grace and understanding for others. And then we can take and live out what we are told throughout the biblical messages and stories. And what are we told? Do not be afraid. That God is your strength. God is your refuge. God is what is going to bring you courage. God is what is truly going to sustain you. And we glimpse that if we let go for even a moment. And we seek out, as the Hebrew scripture says, let your faith be bigger than your fear. Let your faith be bigger than your fear. But to do that, we must name, engage, and introduce ourselves to our fear with knowing that God will take us to a place of love. That you have to have faith. Faith. God is bigger than your fear. Do not be afraid.